Thank you all for coming, and we would like to welcome you to the 10th anniversary of the September 11th Memorial.
Tonight we'd like to thank all of the student organizations that came together in order to make this event possible. That includes the Illini Conservative Union, Sexual Health Peers, College Republicans, Israel Illini, Illini Veterans, Illini Democrats, the Illinois Student Senate, and Interfaith in Action. We'd also like to recognize one of our elected officials here with us tonight, State Senator Mike Frerichs. And with that, we would like everyone to join us in a moment of silence, please. Our first student organization that will speak will be the Illini Conservative Union.
Those men and women that went up were heroes in the face of it all. They must have known what was going on, and they did their jobs. Ordinary people were heroes too. Today, the images that people around the world equate with power and democracy are gone. But America is not an image. It is a concept. That concept is only strengthened by our pulling together as a team. If you want to make us stronger, attack and we unite. This is the ultimate failure of terrorism against the United States, and the ultimate price we pay to be free. The very moment the first plane was hijacked, democracy won. Adam Mablum, a survivor.
Every story we have heard pains us so much because we know that their stories are our stories. Let not one single life have passed in vain. What really matters is who you love and how you love.
America has its faults as a society, as we have ours. But I think of the Union of America, born out of the defeat of slavery. I think of its Constitution, with its inalienable rights granted to every citizen, still a model for the world. I think of a black man, born in poverty, who became chief of their armed forces and is now Secretary of State Colin Powell. And I wonder, frankly, whether such a thing could have happened here. I think of the Statue of Liberty and how many refugees, migrants, and the impoverished passed its light and felt that if not for them, for their children, a new world could indeed be theirs. I think of a country where people who do well don't have questions asked about their accent, their class, their beginnings, but have admiration for what they have done and the success they've achieved. I think of those New Yorkers I've met, still in shock but resolute. The firefighters and police mourning their comrades, but still head held high. Prime Minister Tony Blair.
We express our deep regret and send our condolences, and we are ready to extend whatever aid and assistance is required. War against terror is an international war, and a war of coalition of the free world against all the terror groups and against whoever believes they can pose a threat to freedom. The criminal attack today on innocent civilians in the United States is a turning point in a war against international terror. Even if the war against Islam, and even if terror tries to raise its head again, there won't be any room in the world in which terrorists and their assistants and those who send them will be able to find a shelter or refuge. The government of Israel has decided tomorrow, a mourning day, in a show of solidarity with the American people. I would like to send my condolences to the American people and to all the citizens of the United States. In this very difficult hour, our hearts are with you. Prime Minister of Israel, Ariel Sharon.
It was my sophomore year at Northern Illinois University. Upon returning from morning wrestling practice, I found my roommate staring at the TV in the living room. I'm not exactly sure what station it was, but every station was showing it. A 767 had just crashed into one of the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. Following the first attack, news cameras were on scene. Unknowingly, on scene to provide a live feed to America of another attack and the collapse of the two towers shortly after. It was a shocking feeling to see such a horrific act happen on American soil. I asked myself, Who in their right mind would attack the United States? As a 20-year-old, I did not know much, or even who was responsible at the time. However, you knew that the United States was going to war. Moreover, you wanted some sort of action taken. I always knew that I wanted to join the military. It was a part of a long-standing family tradition. Furthermore, I felt that the military service would open many doors for me later in life. Hence, I attended Northern Illinois University to not only wrestle, but to participate in Army ROTC. After September 11, 2001, wrestling became a little less important to me. Initially, Army ROTC was a program that would allow me to join the military after I finished college. However, I took a long, hard look in the mirror after September 11th, particularly on who I was and what I was doing. A year later, I decided to stop wrestling and dedicate my last few years of college strictly to Army ROTC. It was that Pat Tillman mentality. Smart, athletic leaders needed to answer a call. More importantly, I had to do something greater than myself. 3 months after graduation, I was in my Army Officer Basic course. 4 months later, I was in the mountains of Georgia and swamps of Florida, completing U.S. Army Ranger School. 1 year after graduation from Northern Illinois University, I was in Iraq, leading combat patrols to Tikrit. In my 5 years of service, I completed 2 tours in Iraq and 2 tours in Afghanistan. I experienced the highest of the high, from capturing dangerous men and disrupting organizations that wish to harm Americans, and the lowest of the low, from putting dead Rangers on an airplane. The horrible catastrophes of September 11th invigorated the patriotism of the American citizen. It was a time when we needed to stand by each other, from the Americans that decided to pick up a rifle and defend the nation, to the celebrities who hosted musical concerts to build esprit de corps. I've never seen an era where America stood so united upon any event. Likewise, I've never felt so proud of an accomplishment in serving my country following 9/11 and during a time of war.
Out of the ashes, after the fire of anger and pain dies, all that lies is a pile of ashes, or so it may seem. But what rises from the ashes is a stronger person, who can take the heat, who can take the hurt. What rises from the ashes is something beautiful, something new, something pure, something innocent, and something untouched. Do not think of the end, but the beginning. What rose from those ashes? I rose from those ashes. And what is left are ashes of pain, anger, and regret, but the wind took them away for me forever.
Good evening. My name is Uzma Ahmed. I am from Interfaith in Action, a group whose goal is to promote cooperation and understanding amongst people from different faiths and philosophical perspectives through service work. This gathering is a perfect example of that cooperation, because not only do we have people paying their respects for the victims of 9/11, but a diverse group of people paying their respects together as one. Like President Obama said in his inaugural address, we know that our patriotic heritage is a strength, not a weakness. We are a nation of Christians and Muslims, Jews and Hindus, and non-believers. In the aftermath of that fateful day, our nation found itself in a state of great vulnerability. But today, America's strength is visible here today. Because even though we may have our differences, we have come together to commemorate each of the individuals who lost their lives on 9/11. Individuals who came from all walks of life, backgrounds, and communities. Thank you for embodying that strength today. Thank you for being part of a memorial that encourages greater levels of love and tolerance for one another. Thank you for embodying what it means to be American.
Our final address will be from Student Body President David Pulaski.
The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. These are not simply words written into aging parchment. They are the foundation of liberty and justice in this country, and a light that shines for all who seek freedom, fairness, equality, and dignity in this world. These bold words were spoken by our Commander-in-Chief, Barack Obama, and still ring true this day as we remember the events 10 years ago. We shall never forget the images of planes flying into the World Trade Center or the smoke rising from the Pentagon. We shall never forget the courage and compassion of men and women racing into burning buildings to save the innocents or those heroes who died in Pennsylvania Field. Yet the tragedy did not simply affect only Americans. We shall not forget the image of a boy leaving flowers outside the American embassy in Moscow. We shall never forget the candlelight vigils held in India and Bangladesh. Thousands of Germans marched at Brandenburg Gate. 100,000 Canadians gathered in Ottawa. Even hundreds of students right here on the quad gathered, all sharing in our sorrow. Today, there is no doubt that the horrific acts of a few were far surpassed by the heroic acts of many. Each day, millions of people perform daily acts of heroism in response to terrorism, natural disasters, and everyday challenges. Today, millions of people from around the world stand united behind the ideals of freedom, fairness, and equality. Today, we must recommit ourselves to never forget the legacy of this September Day, 10 years ago, and renew our devotion to the everyday struggles we face around the world. Thank you.
Express my gratitude that you guys are putting together this vigil, because even though it was very close to my home, because I actually grew up in New York City, I was in school at the time, and I remember all the commotion firsthand. They shut down the transit system. My mom had to come pick me up that day, and we walked across the bridge. I could see the smoke while we were walking, and it was pandemonium. Everyone was walking across the bridge. People were jumping into the backs of trucks because they couldn't get buses. They couldn't get home, all these people living in the outer boroughs. But it was very much like resounded very close to me, because I knew a lot of people, kids, students, friends of mine, whose family members were victims in this event, people in my neighborhood. It was very poignant. I couldn't really grasp it at the time because I was only in 4th grade, but I'm just very glad to see that it resounds as strongly out here as it does for you back home on this 10th anniversary of this terrible event. And I'm really glad you guys are putting this together.
So on 9/11, I remember being in school, and I remember my family being really scared because my cousin was going to NYU at the time, NYU at the time, and they had to evacuate her school, and we weren't sure about if she was safe or not, and so that was just really scary for my family, because some of my family lives in New York, so that was just a really scary time for us.
I remember September 11th, 2001. I was in 6th grade. I was in 6th grade, and I just remember the principal coming to my classroom and escorting us all into the auditorium. We didn't know why. And then they played, the news clip, and it showed the towers going down, and it showed the chaos. And at the time, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know why it was so significant and what it meant. I figured that the buildings were some type of old kind of buildings that meant something to New York. I didn't know exactly what it was until the principal cut the TV off, and then she let us know that what had just happened was a terrorist attack. And I didn't know what it was. I never knew of a terrorist attack. I remember in history we talk about Pearl Harbor and stuff like that, but I've never hands-on experienced a terrorist attack, being alive and well aware at the time that it happened. But I can't recall how I felt, because I figured, in my mind, I knew that if it happened in Chicago, then I would be more concerned. But me being naive and immature at the time, maybe it didn't hit me, but that wasn't until I went home. And a friend of my family had members that, were personally affected by this tragedy. So I think that's when it finally hit home that something really serious had occurred, and it would change the face of America from that day on.
So for September 11th, I was in 3rd grade, and my father's actually an airline pilot, and he flew the plane that hit the West Tower to Boston, I think it was, and then it flew from Boston to New York. So my mother was terrified, and obviously thought he was dead. He was in LA before I end the story, and so the principal had to come get me out of class and explain to me, what happened, and that we're not sure where my dad is, but we're sure he's fine, and I took a half day that home and went home. So it was kind of scary. I mean, when I was little at the time, I didn't really understand what's going on. I was like, oh, my he's fine, whatever. It happens all the time. I didn't really know, and then so, 3 or 4 years later, when I found out the whole story, it kind of was like, wow, that was kind of a scary thing. I don't know.
I was in 4th grade, and I wanted to have a play date. And my mom told me that I could not have a play date. And when she told me the reason, I didn't get it.
September 11th, I was in 5th grade, and I was responsible for collecting the lunch money. And so I had to bring it back to my teacher, and my teacher was crying, and I didn't know why. And then I went back, and then I was with someone else, and we were like, oh, there's something wrong with the teacher, she's crying, and we came back and we watched it a little. But then the principal didn't allow it anymore, so everybody went home. and it was really confusing for me, like the first couple days, and it wasn't until the third day that I even realized it was really a really bad thing because no one was really talking about it. So.
All right, so I remember when I found out what happened. I was in 6th grade. I was in Mrs. Gardner's math class, second period, and the principal came on the intercom and said, there's been a plane that crashed in the Twin Towers. And of course, when I was 6th grade, so 11 years old, I had no idea what was going on. My friends and I were all talking, we didn't really know what to expect, and pretty much the entire day of school was just a bit of confusion. I remember they canceled recess because they said there were a lot of bees outside. Of course, as we learned later, they might have had other reasons for doing that. But when I got home and I saw my mom crying while watching the news, I realized that there was something a lot more important than just planes crashing into a tower. The attacks on September 11th meant a lot for my family, as it did for a lot of other families, but I think especially so because I came from a Muslim family. September 11th attacks kind of shed a negative light on Islam, and after the past 10 years, my family has definitely learned the importance of showing others that Islam is a tolerant religion, and showing that we're really excited to be Americans and we really want to get along with all the other Americans and living here. The past 10 years haven't been easy necessarily for my family. There's been some negative experiences, but I'm happy to say that, you know, growing up in a pretty modern community, the past 10 years, even though despite the negative attacks, I felt closer to the country. Even though there were some negative experiences, we felt an overwhelming amount of support from the community, and hopefully this 10th anniversary marks more support and more fosters more like brotherhood amongst Americans of all religious backgrounds.
Please stand and join us in singing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the guns bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
We would like to thank you all for coming on this important day, especially the ROTC and Illini veterans who are with us today.
We'd just like to say that we appreciate the services of all our men and women in uniform, from the armed services to the fire and police departments. So again, thank you for coming.